The notification sound from her phone made Simone's blood run cold. Another bank alert. Another withdrawal she didn't make. She stared at the screen in her car outside the grocery store, watching her savings account balance drop by another $500. This was the fourth time this week. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the recent transactions. ATM withdrawals at 2 a.m. when she was sound asleep. Online purchases she never made. Money transfers to accounts she didn't recognize. Someone was stealing from her and they had access to everything. Simone's mind raced back to 3 months ago when Derek had been so helpful, insisting on updating the security on her phone. "Baby, you work in tech but you don't protect yourself," he had said with that charming smile that made her fall in love with him 2 years ago. "Let me install this banking app for you. It'll keep everything safe." She had trusted him completely. After all, this was her husband, the man she shared a bed with every night, the man who held her when she cried about losing her mama last year. The man who promised to love and protect her when they stood before God and their families at Sweet Bethel Baptist Church. But now, sitting in the parking lot with tears blurring her vision, ugly thoughts crept into her mind. Derek had been acting strange lately. Always on his phone, hiding the screen when she walked by. He'd lost his job at the warehouse 6 months ago but somehow still had money to go out with his friends every weekend. When she asked where the money came from, he'd get defensive and change the subject. The worst part wasn't even the money disappearing from her accounts. It was the sick feeling in her stomach that the person she trusted most in the world might be the one betraying her. She thought about their morning routine, how he always kissed her goodbye and told her to have a good day at work. How he'd text her sweet messages throughout the day. How he'd ask about her password when she was tired, saying he just wanted to help her pay bills online. Simone pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. She'd worked so hard to build her life after growing up poor in South Memphis. Her mama had cleaned houses and worked double shifts just to keep food on the table. When Simone got her degree in information technology and landed her job at the medical software company, it felt like she'd finally made it. She was the first person in her family to have a real career, to own a house, to have savings. And now someone was taking it all away. Her phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Hey baby, going to be late tonight. Meeting up with the guys. Love you." She stared at the message, wondering if this was another lie. Wondering if meeting up with the guys meant sitting somewhere spending her money. The money she'd earned working overtime, skipping lunches, saving every penny she could. Another bank notification popped up. This time it was a transfer of $800. Her heart sank as she realized this would put her account into overdraft. She'd never been overdrawn in her life. Her mama had taught her to always live within her means, to never spend money she didn't have. Simone called the bank's fraud line with trembling fingers. The automated system put her on hold, playing jazz music that felt mocking in her current state. When a representative finally answered, she could barely speak. "This is Simone Davis. My account number is..." She rattled off the numbers she'd memorized by heart. "Someone is stealing money from my account. I need to report fraud. I can see several suspicious transactions on your account, Mrs. Davis. When did you first notice this activity?" "About a week ago, but it's getting worse. They just took $800 20 minutes ago. I'm going to freeze your account immediately and start a fraud investigation. You'll need to come in tomorrow to file paperwork and get new cards." After hanging up, Simone sat in silence. The grocery store parking lot buzzed with normal life around her, families loading groceries, kids playing in carts, couples holding hands. Everyone else's world was still normal while hers was falling apart. She couldn't go home yet. She couldn't face Derek and pretend everything was fine. Instead, she drove to her sister Grace's house across town. Grace had always been the practical one, the one who warned Simone not to rush into marriage, the one who said Derek seemed too smooth, too eager to move in and share everything. Grace took one look at Simone's face when she opened the door and pulled her inside without asking questions. They sat at Grace's kitchen table, the same kind of old wooden table they'd grown up eating at, and Simone told her everything. "I feel so stupid," Simone whispered. "I gave him access to everything. He knows all my passwords, all my account information. I trusted him with my whole life." Grace reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're not stupid for trusting your husband. That's what marriage is supposed to be. But if he's doing this..." She shook her head. "Simone, this isn't just about money. This is about betrayal at the deepest level. What if I'm wrong? What if it's really some hacker or identity thief? Then we'll figure that out. But your gut is telling you something and you need to listen to it. Tomorrow we're going to the bank together and we're going to get to the bottom of this." That night, Simone couldn't bring herself to go home. She stayed in Grace's spare room, staring at the ceiling and wondering how her life had become unrecognizable in the span of a few hours. Every time she heard a car outside, she wondered if it was Derek looking for her. Every time her phone buzzed, she wondered if it was another withdrawal notification. She thought about their wedding day, how handsome Derek looked in his suit, how proud she felt introducing him to all her family and friends. She thought about the vows they'd written together, promising to support each other through good times and bad. She thought about how he'd comforted her when her mama died, how he'd held her at the funeral and promised he'd always take care of her. But maybe his version of taking care of her was different from what she'd imagined. Maybe to him, taking care of himself was the same thing. Maybe she'd been living with a stranger all along. The hardest part was the loneliness. Even surrounded by Grace's love and support, Simone felt completely alone. The person she would normally turn to in a crisis was the person who might be causing the crisis. The person whose arms she found comfort in might be the person she needed protection from. As dawn broke through Grace's bedroom window, Simone made a decision. She wasn't going to confront Derek until she knew for sure what was happening. She was going to investigate, gather evidence, and protect herself. If her husband was stealing from her, she needed to know the full extent of it before she said a word. But first, she had to figure out how to look at him without falling apart. How to kiss him good morning when she wasn't sure who he really was. How to say, "I love you," when love might not be enough to save them from what he'd done. Simone barely slept, and when morning came, she had to force herself to act normal. She drove home early before Derek usually woke up, and slipped back into their bed like nothing had happened. When his alarm went off at 8, she pretended to be asleep. "Morning, beautiful," Derek whispered, kissing her forehead like he had every morning for 2 years. The kiss that used to make her smile now made her stomach turn. She mumbled good morning back and got up to make coffee, her hands shaking as she measured the grounds. Derek came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You okay, baby? You seem tense." "Just tired. Didn't sleep well." It wasn't a lie. "Maybe you should take a sick day. Stay home and rest." Simone almost laughed bitterly. Of course he wanted her to stay home. Probably so he could figure out why her cards weren't working anymore. "No, I've got too much to do at work." At the bank, Grace waited for her in the parking lot. They walked in together, and Simone felt like everyone could see her shame. Here she was, a grown woman who'd been fooled by her own husband. The fraud specialist, Mr. Patterson, was kind but thorough. He walked them through every suspicious transaction from the past month. The pattern was clear: small amounts at first, then larger ones as Derek got bolder. Always when Simone was at work or asleep. "The transactions are coming from the mobile app on a device we don't recognize," Mr. Patterson explained. "Someone installed the banking app on their phone using your credentials." "Can you tell me what kind of phone it is?" Simone asked. He clicked through some screens. "Android device. The same kind your husband has registered on your family plan." There it was. The confirmation she'd been dreading. Grace reached over and squeezed her hand. "What do I need to do?" Simone asked. "We've frozen the accounts and started the investigation. You'll get new cards and account numbers. But Mrs. Davis, you should know, since this person had authorized access to your accounts, it might be difficult to recover all the funds. The law gets complicated when it involves family members." After the bank, Grace insisted they go to her friend Naomi's house. Naomi worked in cybersecurity and might be able to help. Naomi lived in a small apartment downtown, every surface covered with computer equipment and empty coffee cups. "Girl, I haven't seen you since Grace's birthday party," Naomi said, hugging Simone. But her expression got serious when Grace explained why they were there. "Let me see your phone," Naomi said. Simone handed it over, watching Naomi's fingers fly over the screen. After a few minutes, Naomi's face darkened. "Okay, this is worse than I thought. He didn't just install a banking app. He put spyware on your phone. He can see everything: your texts, your emails, your location, your calls. Everything." Simone felt sick. For how long? Based on the installation date, about 4 months. 4 months. Derek had been watching her every move, reading her every message, tracking her location for 4 months. She thought about all the private conversations she'd had with Grace and her friends. The texts to her coworkers. The emails to her doctor. Nothing had been private. "Can you remove it?" Grace asked. "I can, but he'll know it's gone. Right now you have an advantage because he doesn't know you know. Once I clean your phone, he'll realize you're onto him." Simone's mind was racing. If Derek could see everything on her phone, he probably already knew she'd been to the bank. He might know she was here right now. "What should I do?" "Document everything first," Naomi said. Take pictures of your phone showing the spyware. Print out your bank statements. Gather evidence before you confront him. Or before you leave him, Grace added quietly. The word leave hit Simone like a punch. She wasn't ready to think about that yet. This was her husband, the man she'd planned to grow old with. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe they could work through this. But even as she thought it, she knew she was fooling herself. You don't spy on someone you love. You don't steal from someone you're supposed to protect. That afternoon, Simone went back to work and tried to focus on her computer programming tasks. But every few minutes she'd remember that Derek could see everything on her phone. She started typing her emails on her work computer instead, keeping her personal phone locked in her desk drawer. Her coworker Jennifer noticed her strange mood. You okay, Simone? You seem distracted. Just some personal stuff going on. Jennifer lowered her voice. Man troubles? Simone almost cried right there in the office. Jennifer was divorced and always said men weren't worth the heartache they caused. Simone had always defended Derek, always talked about how happy they were together. Now she wondered if Jennifer could see something she'd missed. Something like that. You know I'm here if you need to talk. That evening, Simone came home to find Derek cooking dinner. He'd made her favorite fried chicken and mac and cheese, the way his grandmother taught him. The smell that usually made her mouth water now made her nauseous. Surprise, baby. I know you've been stressed lately, so I thought I'd make you a nice dinner. He was being extra sweet, extra attentive. Was this guilt, or was he trying to distract her from noticing the missing money? That's nice of you, she managed. During dinner, Derek kept glancing at her phone sitting on the counter. Your phone's been quiet today. Usually you're always getting messages. Her heart pounded. He was fishing, trying to figure out why she wasn't using her phone normally. Just a quiet day, I guess. You didn't answer my text this afternoon. She'd seen the text on her locked screen but hadn't opened it, knowing he could see if she'd read it. Oh, sorry. I was busy at work. Derek reached across the table and took her hand. Simone, is everything okay between us? You seem distant lately. The concern in his voice sounded so genuine. For a moment, she almost believed this was all a misunderstanding. Almost convinced herself that her loving husband couldn't be the person stealing from her and violating her privacy. But then she remembered the bank statements. The spyware. The lies. I'm just tired. Work's been stressful. That night, Derek was extra affectionate, holding her close in bed and whispering how much he loved her. Simone lay stiff in his arms, wondering if this was an act or if some part of him really did love her. Could someone love you and betray you at the same time? She waited until Derek's breathing got deep and steady, then carefully slipped out of bed. In the bathroom, she used her work phone to text Grace. Can't talk now. We'll call you tomorrow from work. I think he knows something's up. The next morning brought another surprise. Derek announced he was going to visit his grandmother in Mississippi for a few days. Grandma Ruby's been asking for me and I haven't seen her since Christmas. I thought I'd drive down this weekend. Simone had met Grandma Ruby once at their wedding. She was a tiny, sharp-eyed woman who'd raised Derek after his parents died. She'd hugged Simone and whispered, "You take care of my boy, but don't let him take advantage of your good heart." At the time, Simone thought it was just general advice. Now she wondered if Grandma Ruby knew something about Derek that she should have paid attention to. That sounds nice, Simone said. Tell her I said hello. You should come with me. She'd love to see you again. I can't take time off work right now. Derek studied her face for a long moment. Okay, baby. I'll just go for the weekend then. After Derek left, Simone called Grace from her work phone. He's gone for the weekend. This is my chance to figure out how bad this really is. I'm coming over. We're going to search that house top to bottom. Grace arrived with Naomi, who brought a bag full of computer equipment. If he's been this careless with your phone, he might have left other evidence lying around. They started with Derek's computer. Naomi bypassed his password in minutes and started digging through his files and browser history. What they found made Simone's legs weak. Derek had been researching divorce laws. How to hide assets. How to protect yourself financially in a marriage. He'd been on dating websites, chatting with other women. He'd been planning this betrayal for months. But the worst discovery was a folder labeled Simone's Info that contained screenshots of all her accounts, copies of her passwords, and detailed records of her spending habits. He'd been studying her financial life like she was a target instead of his wife. There's more, Naomi said quietly. He's been selling some of your personal information online. Your social security number, your mother's maiden name, your employment information. He's made about $3,000 just from selling your identity. Simone sank onto the couch. This wasn't just theft anymore. Derek had turned her entire life into a commodity. The weekend Derek spent at his grandmother's house gave Simone time to think, but it also made everything worse. Every hour that passed, she discovered something new that shattered her heart a little more. Grace had insisted on staying the weekend, sleeping in the guest room. "You're not dealing with this alone," she'd said, and Simone was grateful. She didn't think she could handle the silence of the empty house while processing everything she'd learned. Saturday morning, they sat at the kitchen table surrounded by printed bank statements, screenshots from Derek's computer, and legal documents Grace had printed from the internet. The evidence painted a picture of calculated betrayal that went far beyond stealing money. "Look at this timeline," Grace said, pointing to the papers spread in front of them. "He started the identity theft 2 weeks after your mama's funeral, when you were grieving and vulnerable. That's not desperation, Simone. That's predatory." Simone stared at the dates, remembering how supportive Derek had seemed during that difficult time. How he'd held her while she cried, handled the funeral arrangements she was too overwhelmed to deal with, and insisted on taking care of all the bills so she could focus on healing. She thought he was being loving. Now she realized he was positioning himself to have access to everything. "The dating website started even earlier," she said, her voice hollow. 3 months into our marriage. While I was working overtime to pay for our honeymoon trip, he was online flirting with other women." Naomi looked up from her laptop where she'd been documenting everything. "I hate to pile on, but there's something else. The spyware on your phone? It's the premium version. The kind that costs money. He paid to spy on you, Simone?" That detail hit harder than all the rest. Derek had been unemployed for months, claiming they couldn't afford date nights or new clothes, but he'd spent money to invade her privacy. Every time she'd suggested they go out to dinner and he'd said they needed to save money, he'd been lying. Every time he'd made her feel guilty for small purchases, he'd been spending her money behind her back. Sunday afternoon, Derek texted that he'd be home that evening. Simone stared at the message, her stomach churning with anxiety and anger. Part of her wanted to pack a bag and leave before he returned. Part of her wanted to confront him immediately. But the strongest part wanted answers. "I need to know why," she told Grace. "I need to hear him explain how he could do this to someone he claimed to love." "Are you sure you want to do this? We have enough evidence to go to the police to file for divorce to protect yourself. You don't owe him a confrontation. I owe myself one. I need to look him in the eye and ask him why." They agreed that Grace would stay until after the confrontation. She'd wait in the guest room while Simone talked to Derek, close enough to help if needed but far enough to give them privacy. When Derek's car pulled into the driveway at 7 p.m., Simone's heart started racing. She heard his key in the lock, his familiar footsteps in the hallway, his voice calling out, "Honey, I'm home," like he was returning from any normal trip. "Hey baby," he said, dropping his overnight bag and coming to kiss her. "I missed you." The kiss felt like a lie against her lips. Everything about him felt like a lie now. "How was your grandmother?" Good. She asked about you. Said we need to come visit more often." Derek looked around the living room. "You cleaned while I was gone. Looks nice." Simone had indeed cleaned, but not the way he thought. She and Grace had put everything back exactly where they'd found it after searching the house. "I had some free time." Derek settled onto the couch and patted the cushion next to him. "Come here. Tell me what you did this weekend." She sat down but kept distance between them. "Derek, we need to talk." Something in her tone made him sit up straighter. "Okay. What's wrong?" "My bank account was hacked. Someone's been stealing money from me for weeks." Derek's face immediately shifted to concern, but Simone was watching carefully now and she could see something calculated in his expression. "Oh no, baby. That's terrible. How much did they take?" "About $8,000 so far." $8,000. Derek's shock seemed genuine, but maybe that was because he hadn't realized he'd stolen so much. "Did you call the bank?" "I did. They're investigating." Simone paused, studying his face. "They said the thief used the mobile app on an Android phone. Someone who had all my account information and passwords." Derek was quiet for a long moment. Simone could almost see him thinking, calculating his next move. "That's scary. Good thing you caught it when you did. These hackers are getting so sophisticated." "Derek." Her voice was steady now, strengthened by certainty. "I know it was you." The mask slipped. For just a second, she saw something cold and calculating in his eyes before he rearranged his features back into confusion and hurt. "What? Simone, how could you even think that?" "The spyware on my phone. The banking app you insisted on installing. The Android device registered to our family plan." Derek stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. When he turned back, his whole demeanor had changed. The loving husband act was gone. You went through my stuff. You went through my entire life. You've been watching every text I send, every call I make, every place I go for months. I was protecting you. From what? From privacy? From having my own money? Derek's face flushed with anger. From making stupid decisions. Do you know how careless you are with money? How naive you are about people? I was looking out for us. By stealing from me? By chatting with other women online? By selling my personal information to strangers? Derek went very still. You really went through everything. Just like you went through my entire life. The difference is, I'm your wife discovering you're a criminal. You're a criminal violating your wife. It's not that simple, Simone. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The expectations. Your family never thought I was good enough for you. Your sister's been waiting for me to fail. So you decided to prove her right? Derek slammed his hand against the wall, making Simone jump. I never meant for it to go this far. It started small. Just borrowing a little when I was between jobs. I was going to pay it back. Borrowing? You can't borrow from someone without asking. That's called stealing. Everything you have, I helped you get. I supported you, I took care of the house, I was there for you when your mother died. I earned some of that money. The mention of her mother made Simone's vision blur with rage. You started stealing from me while I was grieving my mama. While I was trusting you to help me through the hardest time of my life. I needed the money, Simone. Do you know what it's like being married to someone who makes twice what you make? Everyone looking at me like I'm some kind of gold digger? So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to actually become one? Derek's laugh was bitter. You would never understand. You've never had to depend on anyone. You've never had to smile and pretend to be grateful when someone else pays for everything. I never made you feel that way. You didn't have to. It was obvious every time we went out with your friends, every time your family asked what I did for work, every time you casually mentioned some expensive thing you wanted to buy. I felt like a charity case. Simone stared at her husband, finally seeing him clearly. This wasn't about money. This was about his pride, his resentment, his need to feel powerful. She'd been working to build their life together while he'd been tearing it down out of spite. If you felt that way, why didn't you talk to me? We're married, Derek. We're supposed to be partners. Partners? Derek's voice was getting louder. When have we ever been partners? You make all the money, you own the house, you make all the decisions. I'm just the pretty accessory you bring to work parties. That's not true and you know it. Isn't it? Name one major decision we've made together as equals. Simone opened her mouth to argue but stopped. Looking back, she could see how Derek might have felt diminished in their relationship. But instead of communicating about it, he'd chosen to hurt her in the most personal way possible. Feeling insecure doesn't justify stealing from me, Derek. It doesn't justify lying to me for months. It doesn't justify violating my privacy and selling my personal information. Derek sat back down, suddenly looking exhausted. I know it was wrong. But I didn't know how to stop. Every time I tried to come clean, I thought about how disappointed you'd be. How you'd look at me like I was nothing. Instead, you made sure I'd look at you like you're a criminal. They sat in silence for several minutes. Simone could hear Grace moving around quietly in the guest room, probably listening in case she needed help. The house felt different now, contaminated by betrayal and broken trust. What happens now? Derek asked quietly. I don't know, Simone answered honestly. I don't know if I can forgive this. I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't even know who you really are. I'm still me, Simone. I'm still the man who loves you. No, she said firmly. The man who loved me wouldn't have done this. The man who loved me would have talked to me about his feelings instead of betraying me. You're someone else. Someone I don't know. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. Derek slept in the guest room while Grace stayed with a friend, giving Simone space to think. They were polite to each other, like strangers sharing a house, but the weight of everything unsaid made the air thick and uncomfortable. Derek had admitted to everything once confronted. The spyware, the stolen money, the identity theft, even the dating websites. He apologized repeatedly, promised to get counseling, swore he'd pay back every penny. But his explanations kept shifting. Sometimes he was a victim of circumstance, sometimes he was protecting their marriage, sometimes he was just weak and made bad choices. Simone couldn't tell which version was real, and she was starting to think maybe none of them were. Maybe Derek didn't even know who he really was underneath all the lies and justifications. On Wednesday, she called in sick to work and drove to Mississippi to see Derek's grandmother. She needed to talk to someone who'd known him longer than she had, someone who might help her understand how the man she'd married could have deceived her so completely. The drive to rural Mississippi took 3 hours, giving Simone plenty of time to think. She'd only met Grandma Ruby once at the wedding, but Derek talked about her often. She'd raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. From Derek's stories, she was a strong woman who'd worked multiple jobs to keep him fed and clothed, who'd made sure he graduated high school and stayed out of trouble. Grandma Ruby lived in a small white house with a wraparound porch and a garden full of vegetables and flowers. When Simone knocked, the elderly woman answered the door with a surprised but welcoming smile. "Simone. What a wonderful surprise. Come in, child, come in." The house was small but immaculate, filled with family photos and the smell of something delicious cooking. Grandma Ruby was even tinier than Simone remembered, barely 5 feet tall, but her presence filled the room. "I hope you don't mind me coming by without calling. I needed to talk to someone about Derek and I didn't know who else to turn to." Grandma Ruby's sharp eyes studied Simone's face. "Sit down, baby. Let me get you some sweet tea and you tell me what my grandson has done." Over the next hour, Simone told Derek's grandmother everything. The stolen money, the spyware, the lies, the betrayal. Grandma Ruby listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. When Simone finished, Grandma Ruby was quiet for a long time. Finally, she sighed deeply and shook her head. "I was afraid of this," she said. "I prayed I was wrong, but I was afraid of this." "What do you mean?" "Derek's always been charming. Even as a little boy, he could talk his way out of trouble, convince adults to give him what he wanted. After his parents died, I think I spoiled him too much. I felt so sorry for him losing his family that I never held him accountable the way I should have." Grandma Ruby got up and walked to a window overlooking her garden. "When he was in high school, money started going missing from my purse. Small amounts at first. When I confronted him, he'd cry and apologize and promise never to do it again. He always had an explanation. He needed lunch money or wanted to buy someone a gift, or saw something he just had to have." "What did you do?" "I believed him. Every time. He was so sincere, so sorry. And he was grieving his parents. I thought if I just loved him enough, he'd outgrow it." She turned back to Simone. "But he never did. It just got more sophisticated." Simone felt a chill. "Were there other incidents?" "His first girlfriend, Sarah. Sweet girl from church. Derek convinced her to let him use her car, said his was in the shop. Then he wrecked it and told her it was stolen. The insurance paid out, but Sarah found out later that Derek had been driving. She broke up with him, of course." "He never told me about that. There's probably a lot he never told you. Derek's very good at reinventing himself for new people. He becomes whoever he thinks they want him to be." The words hit Simone like a physical blow. Had her entire marriage been Derek performing the role of the husband he thought she wanted? After Sarah, there was Rebecca. Derek borrowed money from her repeatedly, always with some emergency excuse. When she finally cut him off, he stole her credit cards. She didn't press charges because she felt sorry for him, but she made him pay everything back. "Why didn't you stop him?" Grandma Ruby's eyes filled with tears. "I tried. I really tried. I sent him to counseling, I got him involved in church activities, I thought if I could just show him enough love and support, he'd find his way. But every time I tried to set boundaries, he'd remind me that I was all the family he had left. He'd promise to change and I'd believe him because I wanted to believe him." Simone understood that feeling all too well. Even now, part of her wanted to believe Derek could change, that their marriage could be saved. "When Derek told me he was getting married, I was so hopeful," Grandma Ruby continued. "I thought maybe having a good woman in his life, someone who loved him, might give him the stability he needed to become the man I knew he could be. And now I'm worried he's going to destroy you the way he destroyed those other girls. Derek doesn't know how to love someone without taking from them. He sees love as a transaction. If you care about him, you owe him something." They talked for another hour. Grandma Ruby shared stories about Derek's childhood and teenage years, painting a picture of a boy who'd learned early that being charming and pitiful could get him what he wanted. She tried to teach him right from wrong, but he'd learned instead to hide his wrong choices better. "What should I do?" Simone asked as she prepared to leave. "That's not for me to say, baby. But I will tell you this, if you stay with him, don't expect him to change just because he got caught. This isn't the first time Derek's had to face consequences for his actions, and he's always found a way to slide out of them. Do you think he loves me?" Grandma Ruby considered the question carefully. "I think Derek loves the way you make him feel about himself. I think he loves having a beautiful, successful wife who makes him look good. But loving someone for what they give you isn't the same as loving them for who they are. The drive home gave Simone more time to process everything she'd learned. Derek's pattern of behavior went back years, decades even. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a reaction to unemployment stress. This was who he was. But if that was true, then who had she been married to for 2 years? Had any of it been real? That evening, she found Derek in the kitchen making dinner again. He'd been cooking elaborate meals every night since their confrontation, like he could feed his way back into her good graces. "How was work?" he asked without looking up from the stove. "I went to see your grandmother." Derek's hand stilled on the wooden spoon he was using to stir sauce. "You what?" "I drove to Mississippi to talk to Ruby. I needed to understand who I married." Derek turned around, his face pale. "What did she tell you?" "Everything. Sarah's car, Rebecca's credit cards, the money disappearing from her purse when you were in high school. She told me about the pattern, Derek. How this isn't new behavior for you." Derek leaned against the counter, suddenly looking much older than his 34 years. "She shouldn't have told you those things. That was a long time ago. I was different then." "Were you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you just got better at hiding it. Those situations were completely different. I was young, I was grieving, I made mistakes. And what's your excuse now? You're 34 years old, Derek. You're not a grieving teenager anymore." Derek turned off the stove and faced her fully. "You want to know the truth? The real truth? I've been begging for the truth. The truth is that I never felt like I was enough for you. From the day we met, I knew you were out of my league. You had your degree, your career, your own house. You were this strong, independent woman who could do anything. And I was just some guy working at a warehouse. I never made you feel that way. You didn't have to. It was obvious every time we went out with your friends from work, every time your family asked about my career plans, every time you casually mentioned some expensive thing you wanted. I felt like I was always trying to keep up with your life instead of building our life together." Simone sat down at the kitchen table, exhausted by the circular nature of these conversations. "So you decided to take what you felt you deserved?" "I decided to level the playing field. You had all the power in our relationship because you had all the money. I thought if I had some financial independence, some resources of my own, maybe I could feel like an equal partner." "By stealing from me?" "By borrowing from the person who claimed to love me unconditionally." The word borrowing made Simone's blood boil. "Stop calling it borrowing. You can't borrow something without asking. You stole from me, Derek. You violated my privacy, you sold my personal information to strangers, you lied to my face every single day for months. That's not borrowing. That's betrayal." Derek was quiet for several minutes, staring at the floor. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "I know I messed up, Simone. I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back. But I love you. Despite everything, I love you more than I've ever loved anyone." "How can you say that? How can you claim to love someone you've been systematically betraying?" "Because I never meant to hurt you. Everything I did because I was scared of losing you. I thought if you saw me as weak or unsuccessful, you'd leave me like everyone else has. So instead, you made sure I'd see you as a liar and a thief?" Derek wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I thought I could fix it. I thought I could pay everything back before you noticed, get a good job, and then tell you some story about a bonus or an inheritance. I thought I could solve the problem without you ever knowing there was one. And the spyware? The invasion of my privacy? How does that fit into your plan to protect our marriage? I needed to know if you were getting suspicious. I needed to know if you were talking to your sister about our relationship, if you were having doubts about me. Knowledge was power, and I felt powerless in every other area of our marriage." Simone stared at her husband, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. This wasn't about money or unemployment or feeling insecure. This was about control. Derek couldn't control her feelings for him, couldn't control her success or her family's opinions, so he tried to control her information and her resources instead. "Derek, do you hear yourself? Do you understand what you're describing? You're describing the behavior of someone who doesn't know how to be in a healthy relationship. I can learn. We can go to counseling together. I can get help. There is no we in this anymore, Derek. You destroyed we when you decided to spy on me and steal from me instead of talking to me. Don't say that. Please don't say that. I went to see Ruby because I needed to understand if this was a mistake or if this was who you are. And now I know. This is who you are. This is what you do when you're in relationships with people." Derek moved toward her, and Simone instinctively stepped back. The motion wasn't lost on either of them. "You're afraid of me, he said quietly. I'm afraid of what you're capable of. I'm afraid of what else you might have done that I don't know about yet. I'm afraid that the person I've been sleeping next to for 2 years is someone I never really knew at all. I'm still me, Simone. I'm still the person who held you when your mother died, who supported you through your promotion stress, who celebrates your successes. No, you're not. That person wouldn't have been reading my private messages while he comforted me. That person wouldn't have been stealing my money while he celebrated my promotion. You've been performing the role of a loving husband while actively betraying me. Derek sank into a chair across from her. What do you want me to do? How do I fix this? I don't think you can. I don't think this is something that gets fixed. So you're just going to throw away 2 years of marriage? Everything we built together? You threw it away, Derek. The moment you put that spyware on my phone, you threw it away. The moment you took money from my account without asking, you threw it away. I'm just finally seeing what you did. That night, Simone called Grace and asked her to come over. They needed to talk about practical next steps, divorce lawyers, changing all her passwords and account numbers, figuring out living arrangements. But first, she had one more conversation she needed to have. The next morning, Simone sat in Pastor Franklin's office at Sweet Bethel Baptist Church, the same church where she and Derek had been married 2 years ago. Pastor Franklin had officiated their wedding, had counseled them before they got married, had been someone she trusted for spiritual guidance since she was a teenager. I'm sorry you're going through this, sister, Pastor Franklin said after Simone explained the situation. Betrayal in marriage is one of the deepest wounds a person can experience. I keep wondering if I'm giving up too easily. In our vows, we promised, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. Is financial betrayal something that falls under worse, that I'm supposed to work through? Pastor Franklin leaned back in his chair, his kind eyes thoughtful. Tell me, Simone, do you feel safe in your marriage? The question surprised her. Physically safe? Yes, Derek's never hit me or threatened me. I'm not just talking about physical safety. Do you feel emotionally safe? Do you feel like you can trust your husband with your heart, your vulnerabilities, your future? Simone considered the question. No. I don't think I ever will again. Then you have your answer. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership built on trust, respect, and mutual love. When those foundations are destroyed, the marriage becomes something else entirely. But people make mistakes. People can change. They can. But change requires acknowledgement of wrongdoing, genuine remorse, and consistent action over time to rebuild trust. From what you've told me, Derek's response has been to minimize his actions, blame external circumstances, and expect you to forgive him because he says he's sorry. Simone nodded. That was exactly what Derek had been doing. Let me ask you something else, Pastor Franklin continued. If Derek had come to you 6 months ago and said, Simone, I'm struggling with feeling inadequate in our marriage and I'm having thoughts about taking money from our accounts, what would you have done? I would have talked to him. I would have tried to understand his feelings and worked together to address them. I would have suggested counseling, maybe adjusted how we handle finances, made sure he felt more included in decisions. And if he had come to you and said, I'm tempted to spy on your phone because I'm insecure about your feelings for me, what would you have done? The same thing. We would have talked about it, maybe gone to counseling together, worked on building his confidence in our relationship. But he didn't come to you with those feelings, did he? Instead, he chose to act on them in secret, to violate your trust and privacy while pretending everything was fine. He says he was scared I'd leave him if I knew how he really felt. And now? Simone almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Now I'm leaving him because of what he did instead of how he felt. Pastor Franklin nodded. Derek created the very outcome he was afraid of by trying to prevent it through deception instead of communication. That tells us something important about his character and his capacity for the kind of vulnerability that real intimacy requires. They talked for another hour about forgiveness, about the difference between forgiving someone and staying in relationship with them, about the biblical principles of marriage and the practical realities of rebuilding trust after betrayal. Whatever you decide, Pastor Franklin said as their session ended, know that your church family supports you. You are loved and valued here, regardless of what happens with your marriage. That afternoon, Simone met with a divorce attorney Grace had recommended. The lawyer, Ms. Rodriguez, was straightforward about the legal realities. Given that you have documentation of the identity theft and fraud, and given that Derek has admitted to these actions, you should be able to recover most of the stolen funds through the criminal restitution process. However, that assumes you're willing to press charges. What does that mean exactly? It means Derek would be arrested and charged with identity theft, credit card fraud, and potentially other financial crimes. He'd likely face jail time, depending on the total amount stolen and whether this is his first offense. Simone thought about Grandma Ruby's stories of Derek's past behavior. This might not be his first offense legally, but she suspected it wasn't his first offense morally. What if I don't press charges? Then recovery of the funds becomes much more difficult. In the divorce, you can ask for restitution, but collecting it depends on Derek's ability and willingness to pay. Given that he's unemployed, he might never pay it back. It's possible. Simone left the lawyer's office with a lot to think about. Did she want Derek to go to jail? Part of her was angry enough to want him to face serious consequences. But part of her still cared about the man she'd thought she married, still felt protective of him even after everything he'd done. That evening she came home to find Derek packing his clothes. He looked up when she entered their bedroom, his face resigned. I called my cousin Marcus in Atlanta. I'm going to stay with him for a while, give you space to think about what you want to do. That's probably best. Derek folded a shirt carefully and placed it in his suitcase. I talked to a lawyer today too. I know you're filing for divorce. Derek. No, it's okay. I understand. I know I destroyed something that can't be fixed. He paused in his packing. I just want you to know that I really do love you. I know my actions don't show that, but it's true. Simone sat on the edge of the bed they'd shared for 2 years. I believe that you think you love me. But Derek, love isn't just a feeling. Love is also action. And your actions showed me something different. I know. I know that now. Do you? Do you really understand what you did wrong, or do you just understand that you got caught? Derek was quiet for a long moment. Both, I think. I understand that I hurt you in ways I can't undo. I understand that I violated your trust and your privacy. I understand that I stole from you and lied to you. He looked up at her. But I also understand that part of me felt justified in doing those things, and that scares me about myself. It was the most honest thing he'd said since she'd confronted him. What are you going to do now? She asked. Get help, I hope. Real help. I'm going to find a therapist, try to understand why I keep sabotaging good things in my life. Maybe if I can figure that out, I can be better for the next person. What about your grandmother? Have you talked to her? Derek's face crumpled. She's so disappointed in me. She said she loves me, but she's not surprised, and that's almost worse than if she was angry. Simone felt a pang of sympathy for Grandma Ruby, who'd spent decades hoping Derek would change only to watch him repeat the same patterns with someone else. You should go see her before you head to Atlanta. She deserves an apology, and you deserve to hear what she has to say. Will you? Derek started, then stopped himself. Never mind. What? I was going to ask if you'd consider couples counseling, but I know that's not fair. You didn't break our marriage. I did. After Derek left, the house felt different. Not better exactly, but cleaner somehow. Like a weight had been lifted that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Grace came over that evening with Chinese takeout and wine. How are you holding up? Grace asked as they sat on the couch with containers of lo mein and sweet and sour chicken. Better than I expected. Sad but not devastated. Angry but not bitter. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. You're grieving the marriage you thought you had, but you're also relieved to be free from the marriage you actually had. Over the next few weeks, Simone worked with her lawyer to file divorce papers and with the police to decide about pressing charges. In the end, she chose to file a police report but asked for restitution rather than jail time, on the condition that Derek enter counseling and have no contact with her during the divorce proceedings. Derek agreed to all her terms and signed the divorce papers without contest. Through their lawyers, he sent a letter apologizing again and promising to pay back every penny he'd stolen, though they both knew that might take years given his employment situation. 3 months after that terrible night when she discovered the missing money, Simone sat in her living room with a cup of coffee and the final divorce decree. She was officially single again, officially free from Derek's lies and manipulation. She thought she'd feel more emotional about it, but mostly she felt peaceful. For the first time in months, she wasn't looking over her shoulder or wondering what else she might discover. Her phone was clean, her accounts were secure, and her future was her own again. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. When she opened it, she found a delivery man holding a beautiful bouquet of sunflowers. Simone Davis? That's me. The card read, "Congratulations on your new beginning. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Pastor Franklin and your church family." She smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time in months. She had a family that loved her, a career she enjoyed, and hard-won wisdom about trusting her instincts. Most importantly, she had herself back. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Dinner tonight? I want to hear all about your first day as a free woman. Simone typed back, absolutely. And Grace? Thank you for not saying, I told you so. I would never. But I might say, I'm proud of you for trusting yourself. That evening, as Simone got ready for dinner with her sister, she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who'd discovered those bank alerts in her car months ago. She looked stronger, more certain, more at peace with herself. She'd learned that love without trust wasn't really love at all. She'd learned that her instincts were worth listening to, even when they told her things she didn't want to hear. Most importantly, she'd learned that she could survive having her heart broken and come out stronger on the other side. Derek had tried to steal her money, her privacy, and her peace of mind. But he hadn't been able to steal her strength, her dignity, or her capacity to build a better life for herself. As she drove to meet Grace, Simone rolled down the windows and turned up the radio. The evening air was warm, full of the promise of summer and new beginnings. For the first time in months, the future looked bright. She thought about Grandma Ruby's words about Derek not knowing how to love someone without taking from them. Well, Simone was ready to learn how to love herself without giving pieces of herself away to people who didn't deserve them. It was a beautiful evening for a new beginning. 6 months later, Simone received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a money order for $500 and a short note. First payment. I'm getting help and working on being the person you thought you married. I hope you're happy. Derek. She deposited the money and threw away the note. She was indeed happy, and that happiness had nothing to do with Derek and everything to do with the life she was building for herself. Some endings were really beginnings in disguise. And sometimes the best thing someone could do for you was reveal their true character so you could make an informed choice about your future. Simone chose freedom, truth, and the kind of love that didn't require her to sacrifice her safety or sanity. It was the best choice she'd ever made.